Hey folks, welcome back to thewindowdog.com, the absolute greatest source for replacement window information on the entire internet. Today we ventured out into the wild and we captured ourselves a new specimen. This is the Chateau window from B.F. Rich. B.F. Rich is a regional manufacturer based in Delaware serving the East Coast and Mid-Atlantic part of the country. We're going to take a look at this bad boy inside and out. We're going to see how it compares to its larger competitors. This should be a good one. Get ready for fun. Alright, so here we are taking a look at the inside of this window, and you'll see a couple things stand out right off the bat. First off, this is a typical size for a sample window. It's 20 inches wide, but you'll notice it has two locks. Now, a lot of vinyl windows have two locks when they're installed in your house because they're wider, but typically there's a size threshold where it drops down to one lock. Oftentimes it's 24 inches, 25 inches, 26 inches wide, something like that, depending on the manufacturer and the model. On these windows, it starts at 20 inches, which is a little peculiar. It makes you wonder if perhaps it needs the extra lock to give it more structure at the meeting rail. The meeting rail here in the center of the window is typically the weakest point of any window. And the reason most vinyl windows will have two locks as they get wider is for extra structure. The salesman will talk to you about how it's added security and it helps keep your family safe. That's just a cover. The reason they use double locks on vinyl windows is because it needs that extra structure in the meeting rail, oftentimes. So the fact that this one uses double locks at a narrower size makes me wonder if it might need more structure sooner than other models. Who knows? Just kind of a weird thing about this window. Looking at the inside, you'll see a couple of other neat things that stand out a little bit. You will see the inverted welds on the corners of the sashes. This is the same design that we saw on the Simonton 5500 window we reviewed previously, but the difference is these look a lot nicer. These are smaller and they're more uniform. They look a little bit more in control. I'm still not a fan of the inverted weld from a manufacturing standpoint. I think it's just kind of lazy. It allows you to get away with a little more play and a little less calibration in the tooling. But on this window, it looks nicer than the Simonton. It certainly doesn't look bad or doesn't really stand out. If you didn't know much about windows, you might not ever notice it, which is sort of the point. So they've done a better job than some other folks. Another thing you'll notice is these sort of mitered edges around the glass. It gives it kind of a more finished look, a little bit more like a wood window. Look, they've spent a little more time paying attention to the style of it than you'll see on that Simonton window, for example, and on a lot of other models. So that's another thing going for it as well. As we open the sash, you'll see it's got that same, I don't know if you're picking up the sound, but that same kind of noise and feel from the constant force balance. We have a whole detailed video coming up on balance mechanisms. That's the component that allows it to open and close, prevents it from falling back down when it's open. The constant force or coil balance they use in these is the cheaper type out there. It's not a horrible product, but it is sort of a way to save nickel when you're producing these things, and it appears that's what they've done here. So that's not the greatest feature you've ever seen. Put this sideways a little bit and you can see right in here you've got a balance cover on this window, which as you've seen, or if you've seen some of our other reviews, you know I hate it when windows don't come with a balance cover. That's this small vinyl piece that's snapped in here covering this channel where the balance mechanism is. Again, as we've discussed before, this piece probably costs a nickel to install. It's not an expensive thing, but it shows you that the manufacturer is making an effort to produce windows that look nice and are going to stay clean and operate well for many years to come. Whenever you see a window without a balance cover, you know the manufacturer is trying to be cheap, and it just bugs me. So they've got that going for them as well. Spinning this guy back, get my table all right. When you lift this up, you've got a sloped sill on the bottom, sloped to the outside. That is a more modern design, better than some other things you'll see out there. And we'll show you that more when we get to the outside of the window. As we tilt the sash in, we'll find double weather stripping. So we've got one there and one there. A double weather stripping on the sides, double at the meeting rail as well. So there's one here and there's one here. And there's also an interlocking sash where you have a lip here that corresponds with this lip here. So when the window shuts, it seals in the middle. So it's a relatively common design, but seems to be well thought out, seems to be working well. You've also have the night latches right there that pop open and prevent the window from opening more than 3 or 4 inches. You'll notice as you look at a lot of these samples that the company that produces these little plastic parts, the night latches, the tilt latches, it seems to be one company that has that entire business cornered, because almost no matter what window manufacturer you look at, you'll see the same 2 or 3 designs of these little hardware components. Maybe we'll do an investigative report one day and figure out who that company is, because I bet they're making a killing. But for now, consistent parts, run-of-the-mill, nothing special about it, but looks very nice. You'll see on here that we've got an NFRC sticker on this window, and we show a visible transmittance rating of 0.48, and that's with these internal flat grids in a relatively tight grid pattern. The grids will affect the visible transmittance rating. They'll lower it because they block some of the light. Typically, depending on the window model, the grids will block something like 0.05 or so off the visible transmittance rating. So the fact that this has a 0.48 with the grids, it tells you that it's got a relatively narrow frame. And you can see that by looking at it as well, which means you're going to get more light through this window than you will with some other models. And that's a feature I really like. And for more information on visible transmittance or any ratings, you can find online at thewindowdog.com. So now let's take a look at the outside of this bad boy. spin this around. And one thing we'll see right away on the outside is the screen track, which is this lip here where the screen is inserted into, is a nice design. It's tapered to the outside. It looks like it's part of the window rather than something that was stuck on the outside. And once this is installed in your home, you would typically have capping or brick mold on the outside that would go to about here, typically, and then this part would come right out. So it would end up, the end result when this is installed is that it would look like it was built in the house rather than something that was stuck on afterwards, which is always a look that we're trying to achieve. You drive around town, you'll see all the time, you'll see houses that had new windows, and it looks like something was stuck onto this old house and doesn't really fit, it doesn't really blend in or match. These windows are going to give you a more coherent look when they're installed in the house than you will get with some others, so that's a real feature. Looking at this screen, this thing is a bear to get out. I was playing around with it earlier, but it's a pretty heavy-duty screen. It's extruded aluminum frame, so it's strong as heck. You can't bend the thing. One downside is the spline isn't on the outside. So the spline is the rubber material that holds the screen into the frame. It's on the outside, which means it's going to be exposed to the elements. So this spline is going to be out and sitting in the sun baking for 4, 5, 6, 7, 10 hot summers. At some point, you're probably going to lose it. It's going to get dried out and cracked and split, and your screen's going to get loose. And we have a whole video on how to rescreen a screen. It's an easy thing to do. You can pick up more spline at Home Depot. Once you've done a couple of them, you can knock one out in 2 or 3 minutes. But, it's a Sunday spent rescreening your screens 5 years down the road, whereas you could probably think of something else to do with your Sunday. So the design's lacking a little bit there, but overall it's a much nicer screen than we've seen on some other products. So I would call it an advantage, even though it could be a little bit better. Pop that in. Pops in just like that. And the last thing, or one of the last things we'll see on the outside, is you've got this butt joint glazing bead here, which is also kind of a cheaper way to produce products. Back when I worked in a window plant, which was like 7 or 8 years ago now, we used joints like this back then because it was cheaper. These pieces will compress a little bit as you hammer them in. On the line, there's folks with little hammers that hammer these pieces in, and that you can compress it one in between the other. So if the saw is out of calibration by 1/8 of an inch, even 1/4 of an inch on these pieces, you can force it in there and it looks nice. There's nothing wrong with doing that, except that the butt joint itself is kind of ugly where it's squared off here. While I was working in the plant, we changed the design to make a miter joint on the windows we were producing, which would miter down at an angle. Gives a much nicer, more finished look, but it's harder to produce. If you're off by 1/4 of an inch, you cannot make that fit. You have to cut a new piece, throw away the old one, your scrap goes up. You have to calibrate the saws more often, your maintenance time goes up. So it's a more expensive thing to do, but it looks a little bit nicer. So here they're kind of doing it the cheap way. It is on the outside, and frankly, you're not going to be walking right up to 12 inches away from your windows inspecting them every day, so maybe nobody will ever see it. But, we're taking a close look at these things, and that's something that stands out. Sliding open the screen, you can see the slope sill that we mentioned earlier, so any water that comes in through that screen is going to hit that slope sill and drain off. That's a pretty common design. Unfortunately, it's not a fully welded sill, and you can tell that, I get my angle right here, you can tell that because you've got weep holes on the bottom. These weep holes are designed to let any moisture that gets inside this frame drain out the bottom. There's a drawback to that, we've mentioned before. It's a very common complaint we get when we have windows that we installed 10, 12, 15 years ago. Folks call us up and they say, hey, my windows are leaking, can you come take a look at it? We'll go out there and almost all the time, like 9 out of 10 times, we'll find the weep holes are clogged up. It's spider webs, it's leaves, it's twigs, it's the little spinny things that fall off the tree. All that stuff has been sitting out here for 10 years. You're never paying attention to it, because who would? And these weep holes get clogged up. And then you get a driving rain at just the right angle to fill up this frame. The frame fills up with water, it can't drain out the outside, it overflows to the inside, you've got a leaky window. It's an easy fix, you just shove a pipe cleaner up there. Most of the time you can clear all that goop out. One time I saw a little tree starting to grow out of one. You can clean it out in 10 minutes, it's not a problem, but it would be even better to not have a leak in the first place. So a more newly designed window will typically have a fully welded sill where it's completely sealed on the inside, so there's no way for water to get in, which means you need no way for it to drain out, so it just drains off the slope sill and it's done. That's a little bit more maintenance free, a little bit less problematic down the road. It's a newer design again, this is a slightly older model which does not have that. So are there slightly nicer products out there? Yeah, but generally speaking, this is a pretty decent looking window. We've cautioned folks about working with smaller manufacturers before. We've written up articles on Gorel and Republic and Schuco and different things, and the troubles folks have had, and then the comments people post on those pages are really remarkable because they're exactly what we were sort of warning folks about. So BF Rich is another one of these smaller manufacturers. Although they've been around a long time, they seem to be producing a pretty decent product. It is something to consider when you're considering what company to work with. And heck, a large manufacturer can go out of business tomorrow too. So at some point you just got to roll the dice and take your chances. So I hope you found this information helpful. Again, for the most detailed information on the entire internet when it comes to replacement windows, find us online at thewindowdog.com. If you have any suggestions for features or videos or questions we can answer for you or products we haven't looked at yet, drop us a line on the site, post a comment, or you can email us right through there, and we'll be glad to take a look at it. We're here to help, and we hope you've enjoyed it. Have fun.